Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about SD cards, but mostly the performance. I have been testing out the OWN 512 gigabyte micro express card on the Legion Go 2. I'm ready to share my thoughts. So first, let me tell you what this video won't do. It will not tell you what SD card to buy. You shouldn't buy micro express because the Legion Go can't take advantage of it. There are too many, and most of the time I just default to the Samsung one in my handheld essentials link. I don't have enough information to make a definitive "this is the best" statement. What this video will do, however, is provide a comparison between load times on an SD card versus an internal SSD, uncover any performance issues or stutters due to storage location, review download speeds on SD cards, recommendations on how to properly use an SD card, and then pros of SD card versus SSD. So if you're interested in that, stick around. Let's first start with the game performance. I wanted to include a current gen and a last gen game for this exercise. The reason I did that is because current gen games most of the time require SSD speeds and are built around that. Take for instance my first game, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. When this game was first showcased, they showed that this entire world can be streamed in and out of memories instantly. So rightfully so, they kind of boasted the speed of the SSD as the enabler, which was proven to be mostly true because you can run it on a hard drive. But if you do that, you have to be content with small stutters and texture streaming issues. That was similar to my experience as I played. Even though the game could technically run off the SD card and I didn't lose much performance, it loaded levels at a much slower pace. This had a huge impact on my overall experience, and that is really the big point here. Taking a look at that same game running off the internal SSD though, you can see a much more improved performance. This is a win for the SSD. Next, I took a look at PS4 games that didn't require the SSD. Anything that came before the PS4, I think you should be fine. But I wanted to try one that did not need the SSD. Mad Max is a AAA title in its own right, but it has nowhere near the need for fast read or write speeds. So off-shelving that to the SD card proved to be a success. I noticed no impact to performance, and overall the load times were snappy and quick, providing a path for a useful SD card experience. After reviewing the performance, I figured I would be best to review the capabilities of downloading and transferring data. My results were essentially what I expected. Setup and download times on the SD card is significantly longer than that of an internal SSD. Expect to see longer wait times between the two. I did the work for science, of course, which showed that a transfer from an SSD to an SD card and vice versa took about 8 minutes for a 34 gigabyte game. So kind of take that math and kind of land it to what 100 gig what would look like, and so on and so forth. My speeds unfortunately can get better than that, so it just becomes, why am I transferring? Why am I not just deleting and re-downloading? While we're on the topic of download speeds, those didn't fare much better, as the SD card nearly halved my download speeds and almost tripled my time. I showed that while downloading to the internal SSD, it took only 6 minutes, but using the SD card, it took 16 minutes, a significant shift. The good thing is that it's not all doom and gloom, especially if you know what to use these SD cards for. SD cards have a purpose, and here is my recommendation. I'll reserve my SD card for PS4 and below as a parameter to make sure I'm having a great experience and load times will be sufficient. I will also use it for emulation. I was able to easily run games from the PS2 era like Freestyle and Devil May Cry 3 without issue, moved on to Dreamcast for some Ready to Rumble and Power Stone, until finally moving to the big boy PS3 for NBA 2K11 and Heavenly Sword. All of these ran great. I do believe, however, the experience would have been better on internal storage, as there's a lot of shader compiling, so those steps take a little bit longer than usual, but overall, the SD card still was very impressive and I enjoyed my experience. Your mileage, of course, may vary depending on the type of card you pick up. This was a budget micro express card, so take that for what you will. The thing is, though, it didn't start off that way. It wasn't all rosy. When I first began using the SD card, I would get hitches and stutters in every Dreamcast game. The fix for this was relatively easy to implement, and I will provide a little bit of background. Emulation, particularly for modern systems, is highly input-output intensive. Emulators frequently read and write small data blocks for things like game textures, dynamic shaders, cache files, and stuff like that. So while a high-quality SD card boasts fast sequential read and write speeds, their random read and write speeds are significantly slower than the internal NVMe SSD. So with that being said, you're going to see some fetching issues, some random files running slower, and that's where you start to see like, okay, why am I stuttering when the SD card does have pretty decent write speeds, especially for this type of game? So I was able to solve that. What did I do? Basically looked it up online, but what they gave me was format your SD card to NTFS. NTFS is the default and native file system for modern Windows operating system, which is what Legion Go 2 runs, of course. This ensures like you get the best stable performance, but it also does some things in the background to make sure it's running properly. Mine was running on exFAT originally, but once I made that switch and formatting it to NTFS, I had no more issues with my games. So final thoughts. I was really impressed by the performance of the Legion Go 2 and the SD card combination within emulation. I believe open world PS4 generation games will also provide comfortable level of stability and performance. I do not recommend SD cards for any modern games because you will run into stuttering and issues with loading. As we all know, the RAM and storage situation with PCs is insane. So I understand you wanting to do an SD card to kind of expand that storage. What I don't want you to do is fall into the trap of spending a lot on an SD card, like a 2 terabyte, and really the performance gain isn't there yet to be beneficial. And you're really not putting in much games on it that are useful anyway. So my gut would be to always default to internal SSD upgrades, SD card next. I use my SD card in a very specific way. It's mostly emulation, but understanding the situation today, it makes sense that you want to take a look at those options. Just be aware of what you're buying into, make sure you format it properly, and understand where games should be and what games should be on your internal SSD. But that's pretty much it for the day. Thank you all for watching as always. If you enjoy the content, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comment section below some of your favorite things about the Legion Go 2 or whether or not you will be using an SD card. I want to hear those down below. Thank you all. And until next time, ladies and gents, peace.
Had to pause. It's over.